Okay, going live now.
Okay, we're on. So we are live. And I believe people can just join in. Hopefully they have the right link.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, we're here.
We are. Let me just check to make sure.
Okay, let's see if I can see.
So you won't see anybody on the call. They're actually all watching it from YouTube, but you have about 200 odd people that are you won't tuned see in anybody right on the call. They're actually all watching it from YouTube, but you have about, just so you know. So
Okay, thank you. So we are live. Welcome everyone to AAC in the Cloud. I'm Nancy Robinson, and I have the pleasure to introduce Rachael Langley and Marlene Cummings, who are going to share their presentation, No Experts Here, an argument for building capacity to support AAC. So we really look forward to learning from you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for introducing us, Nancy. And so good to see everybody today. And thanks for your patience. We help put on some other events. And as the whole world knows now that we've spent a year with a lot of Zoom meetings, sometimes things don't always click when they click, but we're here and we're so excited to get started with you. I am honored to have Marlene right here in the same room with me because things just worked out today. And we're here to talk about what it means to build capacity to support people who use AAC, with our perspective specifically coming from the school-based setting. So we called it an argument for building capacity to support AAC, but we could just as easily call it a conversation with Marlene and Rachael. Because that's what we hope to have today and share some insights with you from things we have learned as we've journeyed through supporting AAC learners in the school. So here we are. We do both work in the school-based setting in different areas. I work in Eaton County, Michigan, which is near the capital of Lansing, Michigan, as an AAC consultant. And I also own a private business where I do some speaking and contracting and things. But today I'm specifically speaking about my experience from the schools.
And I'm Marlene Cummings, and I have a similar background, but a much longer background in the field. And so I also have a private company that I do speaking and implementation support, but I also work at Oakland Schools, which is a large school district in Michigan, and we serve 28 different local school districts. And so I'm also talking from that vantage point of how do we get everyone on the same page to build capacity, because I know that all of you that are watching know we have so many more individuals that we're serving that need AAC, and so we've got to spread the word quickly and build capacity quickly.
So the big questions that we will talk through today, and the questions you might have, just hearing the title and the basic description so far, are things like, but hold on, AAC is such a specialty area, right? And it's such a small sliver of the population. Don't I want to be an expert in AAC? And also, what does it look like to build capacity around AAC? That's kind of sometimes I don't know, catchphrase that we hear used, but without understanding that might still be a lingering question. And then how can your team, or how can my team at my school help create shared knowledge and responsibility around AAC to move in that direction towards building capacity? So we hope to answer all those questions and more through our chat today. So let's dig in. Picture this. This is what I feel like so many people want as their ultimate goal. You have the best AAC expert and they work in your school. Every problem you have is fixed. They find the right piece of equipment. They tell you what software to use. They program things. They train the families. They train teachers and paraprofessionals, and they are at every meeting you could possibly need. That's like ideal expert, right? However, what happens when they leave? they get a different job or they retire. The risk there is that now you've lost so much when all of your resources are tucked away in one single person who solves so many of those problems. And we'll talk about some of the other kind of risks that go along with that, but we just want you to start from that mindset to think about, that sounds ideal, doesn't it? And some of us, we want to be that. We want to be that person who solves every problem. But we really want to talk through, what does it mean to be more system dependent? Now what? What do you do if they leave, right? We want to talk about what it means to be system dependent and not so person dependent. So we'll talk through what that looks like in our session.
So one of the first things we always think about when we start shifting that mindset, when we encourage people to think about capacity building, is they immediately go to all or nothing, right? So either we have the expert model or we have this other thing, this other capacity building collaboration model. And what we want to talk about today is that we want people on our team that are highly knowledgeable. We want to look at the expertise in the different areas of the people that we're connected to, but we want to do it together. And we want to figure out a way to honor the skills and the gifts that different people on the team have, which also takes the burden of being the sole problem solver, right, on the team. So that's what we're going to help you think through, is not all or nothing, but something in between called collaboration.
All right. So when you think about becoming an expert, we know from research and from books out there that there's the number referenced at 10,000 hours of experience and knowledge and learning in an area to be considered an expert. And think of how rare that would be. We love having a resource like AAC in the cloud and how much content is shared. It would take a lot of years, 20 years of AAC in the cloud, watching every single session before you would reach that kind of 10,000 hours. But the other risk of having that one single person as your main problem solver and your flow through is the risk of what we consider gatekeeping. So I know there's some districts out there that are set up where if you have a child where you think they really need something, I want to start trialing some kind of communication support, that child has to get in line, right? They're referred out to whatever the evaluation team is, and they're told, well, it's a 4 to 6 month wait. And then after that long wait and all this anticipation, they come out and they say, well, they're not quite ready. We really want to see, and then they may list some like prerequisite skills they expect before they do something. And I really used to have kind of these rose-colored glasses and think that was a thing of the past. We've moved past that. But from conversations I've had and from some traveling I've done around the country, speaking with some people out there, I realized that's alive and well. That kind of gatekeeping is still there. And that's what happens when you're waiting on the one person to come and answer those questions and give the one solution. And then really just the logistical strain of having one person. If you're waiting for me to come and fix a device every time it doesn't work, or if you're waiting me to come and add a word every time you need something added, that's just not logistically possible. The people that typically have a lot of expert knowledge on AAC are usually covering a really broad area. Marlene has dozens of schools, and I have a little bit more of a rural area that I support. So I have a lot of miles that I cover, and it's just not logistically possible.
I absolutely love some of the comments about somebody mentioning, I totally have all the solutions, right? Doesn't that like stress you when you walk in and they really believe you do? It's like, no, how?
Yeah.
And so when we think about capacity building, this is just a nice kind of capsulation. It's a process for developing. So think about that. We're creating and developing, and we're also strengthening skills, instincts, abilities, processes, and resources. And if you think about our organizations today, right, they're moving and shifting. They're pretty fluid, which I don't know about you, but sometimes I'd rather them not be so fluid. I kind of like routines. I'd like to stay a little solid sometimes. But when we think about our organizations, to survive, to adapt, to thrive in this world that we're moving in, we need to do just what we're talking about, capacity building. I don't know about the districts you're in, but every day we're hearing of someone else retiring, somebody else leaving. The best of the best in a district all of a sudden is going into another position, and it's leaving an enormous amount of stress on people about now what, right? What are we going to do next? And so these are some ways that we hope we can share with you on how to remedy some of that, or at least begin the process. So we're going to talk about capacity building in a collaborative means. We're going to talk about the collaborative piece and the multi-tiered piece. And so when we think about collaboration, we need to be asking ourselves some very specific questions about who can do what on the team, right? We talk about even triaging the problem. So are there aspects of the work that only you can do? So there's a validity to having an expert in a specific area, right, that you need to deal with. So you might have an expert in AT that needs to bring in all those tools to access the curriculum. You may have an expert specifically in the language, like the robust language page sets, and how to manipulate or manage, how do we think about those, right? You might also, of course, you will have, I believe, the expert in the curriculum, right? What are the goals and what are we looking at in terms of our long-term plan for this student? And so you want to ask yourself, what can I do? What are those pieces only I can do? What are the pieces that I can share with someone? So they need a little help, right? Or we're going to do it together. And what are the pieces that I'm just going to be there to support if they need it, but they're really running with it? And what we find is we don't want to get too routinized in who does what, because every student is different, right? They bring something different to the table. Every classroom looks a little bit different. So we want to have some flexibility and fluidity when we're thinking about how we're going to show up. And so I know with Rachel in her county, she often shows up with one hat on and then she changes the hat and shows up with a different hat on. I do the same, right? How many hats do you wear in a day is the question. So we want to be flexible in our thinking as we consider these questions. And these are examples of who might be doing what. Right? We're thinking about assessment. We have to think about goals, progress monitoring, lesson planning. What are those strategic strategies that we're choosing for implementation? What are the instructional strategies already in the classroom? Device updating and maintenance, right? That's all of our nemesis, right? We have to do it because thank God for tech. I lived in a season when we didn't have any of that. I know I'm old, I admit it. But we didn't have any choices. So now I celebrate that I have to work on them, right? Because we have them. And then of course, updating all the things that Rachel talked about that often the expert does. How do we divide and conquer all of these pieces?
I love that so much because we know there's strengths on the team and every team looks different. You talked about not getting too routine. Sometimes people will say like, well, who on the team should run the updates? And you have to look at each team. There's some classrooms where there's just a parapro who's like, I can literally do that in my sleep. I want it to be me. And then you know, that's their role that you have a conversation with, but other teams it's somebody else. So that's okay. Play to everybody's strengths, right? You want this one?
Oh, sure. Yep. So why should my school think about moving toward a capacity building model? So there's a book that we referenced in here called Coherence. And it asks some of these powerful questions. And we did it as a county, but I've done it in different groups. And often there's a lack of direction. So we might not have clear outcomes, right? I know that many of you might have walked into a situation where it seems pretty chaotic, right? You're trying to get order and figure out where to go. We also might have a challenge where progress is not happening, right? And it could be because of movement of staff. It could be an unstable curriculum that we're working off of, but we have to figure that out. Another thing we're going to talk about is partnerships. Do we even have partnerships? Are we doing this together in a collaborative model, or is it all left on one of our shoulders, right? That we've got to do it by ourselves. And so often there are circumstances that will bring us to a place of say, we've got to change our model. And I have a school that I'm thinking of right now that they just lost 3 major players. and they are pretty much in chaos. They're devastated, and they don't have a capacity building model. And so now they have to figure out how they're going to fill those roles and what those people even did. Right. So those are some of the things that we might have that would move us in this direction.
Mm-hmm. And then we talked through too on that next slide.
Right. And these are just some of the things we're going to be addressing. One of the biggest pieces, so in the county that I work in, some other work that I've done, when we started coming together for implementation, we realized we weren't on the same page. We didn't have shared knowledge. I teach a class, a graduate class at a university, and I am shocked when I start talking to the students even about how they view language, how they view AAC, how they view students that are not vocal or can't use their natural speech. It is it is from one end to the other. And so we realized we had to get to a place where we had common or shared knowledge. What that looked like, and then the skills that we were going to apply. What are the strategies we're going to pick? And then what are the resources that we're going to use that we can all use? Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to customize a lot of this, but we've got to start in a place where everybody is on the same page. We also are not going to focus on 100 goals, right? And it's the student's goals, right? Not my goal, your goal. It's how we're going to support that student. And then the biggest issue is, can we sustain it over time? And that's what we're finding as the result of the quarantine and all the issues is we haven't sustained anything. What we had in place fell apart pretty quickly. So that has to be an ongoing thought. We need a 3 to 5 year plan, not just a 1 year plan.
And man, sometimes that takes some conversations with administration or even the school board or your school improvement team, because I feel like in public schools, we have a really hard time getting folks to think beyond a 1 school year timeline. Do you guys feel that way? Drop it in the chat if you've had that same experience. We're trying to say, well, this is what we're working towards as a school, but these are the steps we'll take over the next 3 to 5 years to get our team there. So instead of thinking about that expert model, we want to think about how we can be an influencer, and not necessarily a social media influencer, although I see some of our great social media influencers on here. Hi, friends. But how can you influence your community that you're in your school with that knowledge? And when you have that, people recognize specialization in you, you have that power and that influence to kind of rub off on those around you. You can share stories, you can hear other people's stories, but through those discussions, you can change mindsets, right? The goal is to expand people's shared knowledge. So it's not just even you and the teacher, it's the whole classroom staff, getting paraprofessionals and other therapists on board. So you share that common experience and common understanding about a learner. And through that, you can deepen the implementation, that it's not just at this 20 minutes a day when we're really focusing on this skill, but it can ripple out across the room. And through that, you can create a communicative environment that's just naturally set up to support communication. So through all those different steps, and by influencing the team in different ways and developing those relationships in the classroom, you can really begin to shift the culture, right? It does not happen quickly. And I've experienced that, where I go in and think, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do it, here we go. It really takes time to change mindsets and help people view their role differently, and not just hey, I'm here, this is my job, you do communication and I do what I do, but to shift that culture and have that positive influence on others, that communication happens all the time, right? And here is a little secret something here on the slide. Try to pick a lock. We'll just say metaphorically, maybe the lock is a really tough team member on your team you're trying to influence or something like that, but also try to pick a lock. Okay, somebody already got it. You guys are fast. And then we move on to, we'll break down these pieces that we've kind of hinted at a bit, right? The first one being shared knowledge.
I just have to say the comments are lovely, and clearly this is resonating with many of you of the challenge that we're confronted with. I also can't wait to see what was done with Jillian King's team. I'm so excited. I knew her from years and years ago, so I will absolutely reach out to you. So as I talked earlier, shared knowledge is a big deal. If we're not on the same page, then we're going to go in 100 different directions and we're not going to pull together. And so one of the big pieces is cultivating what that shared knowledge is going to be, and then how are you going to share it with everyone involved. And so the nuts and bolts is really important. So what is part of that shared knowledge? You know, how do we look at robust vocabulary? What are those strategic strategies that everybody can apply, right? And that need to be applied over time? Symbol sets, equipment, all of those pieces can be part of that professional learning. And I've done lots of presentations on professional learning, so feel free to reach out. But you need to build a plan that people can connect to over time. And it needs to be spread far and wide. And so if that means meeting once a month, if that means intensive, 6 to 12 hour trainings. One of the things we're doing in our county right now, we have some amazing new team members, and they're really supporting us in figuring out how do we make it on demand? How do we have a variety of ways to make connection to that content and truly begin to implement it?
There's that 3 to 5 year plan again. I love it.
So, this is yours. Yes.
So the shared knowledge can come in the nuts and bolts that you can get from a conference like this, or from any other little trainings that come through specific vendors and things like that. But shared knowledge also means a really rich and full understanding of our learner, right? So the main reason I know I cannot be an expert is I cover so many places. I can't know the students really well the way other team members do. So to really do well at applying the language and communication supports that student needs, I need to have an understanding of their strengths, their interests, what their motor skills and access skills might be to really get rich access to language, their preferences, how do I engage them? What are they really motivated by, their learning style, and how they engage with others. Are there certain things about their social skills, that who their closest friends are? Do they like having peer mentors and things like that? Through that, what we know is this is the stuff an outside person who might be really skilled at the equipment or really skilled at a vocabulary set won't always know about the learner. It's very rare that you would find someone who knows all of the richness of the nuts and bolts, but also really has in-depth knowledge. So we have to honor the fact that a lot of times this information comes from families and from teachers, people who have daily experience with the learner across lots of settings. So that counts as part of that shared knowledge. These are a few examples of different types of tools I've used in different team meetings and collaborative groups and things when we track and share and develop a common knowledge about our learner. One is using the SET framework by Joy Zabala, and I just put a little example of a graphic on there, but we have kind of our own way we track it in our county to say if the student has a need, what do we know? How about the student, the environment they're in, the tasks they're being asked to do, and what tools have we tried? So that's one way you can track and have some shared knowledge about that student and the environment that they're in. Another example up there just says classroom communication plan. I've seen lots of different versions of this, but really it's a starting point for the team. So if we're saying, here is a brand new student or a brand new piece of equipment, let's first target a few points in the day and talk about those times and give some examples of language that we might target. These are words we might use that can be shared with the family, that can be shared with the other therapists, so everyone's on the same page about what types of things you're targeting. And then finally, the last one is something I've just called a communication passport, but I've again seen lots of versions of this where it shares what do we know about how our student communicates. With the top one being, these are skills I have independently. The next one being, these are skills I'm developing and you can support me with them. A reminder of communication goals. But whatever tool you use, whether it's one of these or something else, notice down here in the corner, there's a symbol for the Google Drive. I happen to work in a district that uses Google Drive, but whether it's Drive or Microsoft Teams or whatever structure you use, think about making that information available to everyone who works with.
What we talked about.
I wondered if anybody might want that communication passport. I don't have that now, but let me think about that. This isn't a real student, just so you know, that's just a stock photo. But
we talked about that last night when we were discussing this thing. We should create something.
Get around to that, but I will. I'll make that available somehow. but that you share it in some kind of community drive, so that if I only see Johnny here 3 times a year and I'm going to revisit and meet with the team, I can peek in the drive and look at their communication plan, or see if anyone's updated the SET framework, see if there's any new information, or if they need a little nudge to maybe update, like we know something about medical status has changed, let's update the communication passport and things like that. It's just a way to streamline what we know and improve our shared knowledge experience for that learner.
And I absolutely love a lot of the comments about the impact that this season has had on our connection with parents and how much they have brought to the table for us. And I know that where I'm at and my thinking is I need that to continue. Like I need to keep creating those connections with them, with the families, and with other team members even that are zooming in that I'd be seeing in the hallway, right? Or I might have 5 minutes with, and now they were able to sit in a meeting with us and share such amazing interactions and comments and knowledge and observations about the students that we wouldn't have gathered otherwise. So this is a pretty unprecedented season, and I do think that we need to take away from it as many gems as we can. So now we're going to talk about the implementation of shared skills. And so we have that knowledge base, right? But what are we going to do with it? What are the specific strategies that we're going to implement, and how is that going to look? And so when we think about those shared skills and from a capacity building model, is everybody needs to learn how to apply those strategies that we've chosen. So in our field, it would be aided language input. It might be vocabulary instruction, right? What does it look like to provide a set of universal core vocabulary and everybody having access to that and understand that? What we found is we're really good at sharing knowledge, and especially, oh my gosh, during this pandemic, there are resources everywhere. Now I have to sort them, right? Well, what are the best ones to share, because it can be overwhelming. But what does that implementation look like where we're doing it every day? And so we'll talk a little bit about what does it look like in the classroom? What does like a job embedded model look like? Coaching look like? And if you've done a C with ASHA or at ATIA, you see these beautiful coaching models, and they've even figured it out to do on Zoom, right? How can you coach a family from afar? We need to be doing a lot more of that, but that needs to be applied when we're doing skills. And again, at the bottom it says sustained, intense effort. We can't let up. So how many times do we have a student we're applying AAC to, and we're like, oh, that's not working. Let's go to another device. Let's pick another something because it just didn't work fast enough for us. So the capacity building model is slow and steady, right? You don't just give up because, oh, that got too hard. The communication was too hard. I couldn't connect with them. They're not on the same page with me. This is intense effort over time that truly shifts the mindset and the culture.
I love that.
And so one of the big pieces is we have to do it with everyone involved, and we have to do it in all the different activities and in all the different environments, right? And we often miss that. So we'll get pretty good in one arena or with one colleague, and we're like, we had this, but then we just realize there's 3 other colleagues that serve that student throughout the day that we haven't even talked to yet, right? So we have to do this again across activities, across environments. And remember when we talked about that knowledge about the student, we have to integrate that into these skills. So we're going to say, these are the general skills and strategies. They're amazing. Now, what specifically about that student causes us to apply this skill more often, this strategy more often than for someone else? And I don't know, I know in some of the sessions you've talked about Karen Erickson and David Copenhaver, and they talk a lot about repetition with variety, right? So we're going to press in and embed all of this, but it has to have variety. It can't become too routinized to where now we've just got someone repeating what we've asked them to do without authentic, true communication happening.
So we've talked about shared knowledge. We've talked about how to apply that shared knowledge into using skills that are shared across environments and across people. The next thing we're going to talk about is shared materials and resources. And we started talking about it a little when we talked about, hey, can we use that Google Drive to share a collection of resources about a specific student? But we also want to talk about how that expert model of someone's going to come in to treat this one little gem, and they are all gems. I have 3 little gems myself, but for that specific student, we're going to make everything from scratch. That takes so much time, and it's not typically necessary. And that's not to say that some students don't need support. They do. Often a lot of our students with vision, motor, hearing, or sensory differences need some accommodations, and sometimes we do need to adapt things to work. But I don't think in the capacity building model says we don't need to approach everybody as a fresh start, that we should have some tools that are common kind of in your tool belt that you can pull out and try to get started, right? So the one question to ask it to reflect on whether you're leaning into that expert model or if you're leaning more to that building capacity model is, do I approach each case, or do we as a district look at each student as completely starting from scratch? What does the student need? Or do we go in and say, we've tried, again, we talked before about tiered supports. Have we done like a tier 1 support with this student to see if some universal and common tools help at all, and then we add some accommodations, or then we adjust from there. On that same note, when we talk about shared resources, we think too, is there continuity across our programs or across our building, or is each classroom its own little island? And I've seen some beautiful little islands and they're lovely. Some teachers who just, wow, they do all this amazing stuff, but it's not part of a greater network. So when that student ages out of that program or that student moves to the next building, they've left the island, right? And now what? Are we starting from scratch again? Or are they just moving whatever device or whatever resources they have with them, and now this whole team needs to understand, how did they get there and how was that developed? So ideally, to build capacity, it's not just one classroom that's sharing knowledge and resources, but it's shared across the larger community. And there's someone who has an eye on that continuity of programs across a district or even a county, but at least within a building, so a student can be supported as they've moved through the classes they're in. And then finally, is there a process for trialing equipment? I have seen and I have lived that experience where again, each child is treated as kind of a brand new unique case, and someone comes forward and says, we would like to try AAC with this child. And they go, okay, well, let's talk about it. Now we will go and we will order something. And in 8 weeks, when it comes in, we will set it up and we'll have another conversation. And I know that to get some of that custom or the accommodated materials, it does take time. But can we also look at shared resources in the sense of a larger lending library? Is there a way to just say, we have an inventory of iPads, and when we want to start, we have an inventory of apps, and we pick based on that program, that classroom, and that student's needs, what we're going to trial right away. There's just so much waiting, and I feel for any families that are tuning in that I know, and teams, I know there's so much waiting. To get an AAC evaluation can be a long wait. To get the equipment and insurance approval is a long wait. But in the schools, I think we can be more responsive than that. I think we can develop some shared resources that are shared across a district or county where we can put things into place quickly. So, and I come from a district that does not have a wealth of resources. And I have seen that if we can do this, it takes time. You have to have a longer plan. But if that's something that we can develop in my little rural county without not a lot of resources, I'm pretty confident a lot of districts can move that way too, that we can be quicker and more responsive with shared resources. So it just breaks my heart when I hear people say, well, we started this, but, it was a 2-year wait. It just, 2 years is a lot of time to lose language opportunities, communication opportunities.
So I just wanted to comment on some of the comments. I'm not responding. Rachel's so much better at the whole tech doing multiple things. So I'm going to try to respond verbally. Many of you are talking about the challenge of all of this. And I just want to comment briefly as I talk about the resources, the importance of having a plan across a district. And so I did some training years ago in a large school district, and I had, I think, 54 members that participated in a year and 2-year training. And they were the birth to 5 teams. And they got started so powerfully. And yet at the same time, we had other people saying, we don't do it that way within the same district, right? And that's when we recognized, oh my gosh, again, that shared knowledge, we're off in 100 different directions here. And so we're now tugging in different directions. And the unfortunate part is the impact that has on families, right? And on those students, because they keep getting a change. Okay, now we're going to try this. Now we're going to try this. And so the capacity building model really serves that need to build that capacity to get shared knowledge amongst all the team members across an entire district or a county, which, right, that would be amazing. So some of the things when we think about shared resources is start with universal tools, right? Find those tools that we can put in a classroom, in a building. For us, we have countywide tools and resources, a universal core. And it's been incredible because is it fully customized? No, but it's a starting place. And how many of our students don't even have a starting place, right? The teams don't even understand the need for that. And so we put in a universal core. And my boss at the time, it was very funny. She said, I had no idea that as you did this, we would get that many more requests, right? But as we shared the knowledge, more and more people recognize the need for AAC, how powerful it could be, and the changes it could make. We also discovered, so I had this wonderful conversation with Dr. Carol Zangari, you I'm sure know her, and I was talking about these kits we were putting in place and how they were universal kits, and I'm like, and people are not really understanding it, and she goes, well, think about it this way, intervention before assessment, right? Brilliant. I'm like, how come I didn't think about that? So we were giving everybody intervention tools for language, right? And then we were going to start customizing as we went along and got more specific for each student, but we were able to get started and it really changed everything. So you want to think about, as Rachel said, a shared lending library. What are those resources? What are the devices? What are all the ways that we can come together where it's more alike than different? And then we can begin to look specifically at what we need to give to students for them.
As you were saying that, I was watching the chat, and you guys, I'm going to let Marlene answer on this more. The question came up about specific language system first approach. And I will say, thank you for sharing all those resources. We do have an approach that's pretty similar to that where I am. I'm in a smaller county. We use a universal core vocabulary set that functions as our tier 1, and we have that widely available in a low-tech or paper-based format, either big core boards, little core boards, high contrast, all different formats for one. But then we also offer that same vocabulary set on a high-tech device across a couple different AAC programs that we've kind of made our own template for, and that might have been a tip that came from somebody I know. But we also have LAMP that we use, so we're not exclusive. I mean, specific language system first, kind of, but there are some situations and some circumstances where LAMP is not our specific system for that doesn't match our universal core that we use, but there are some cases where we don't start with our core, we start with LAMP and we build that way and build a community support around that. So that's my answer to that. I encourage you, if you have more questions about what Marlene hinted at here about, like, let's talk about our universal tools. We are just to the point now, we've done the set of core vocabulary we use enough that I think it's pretty widely accepted across, again, my little county of 5 different districts that I work with, that we know that that's something we pull out and start with, whether it's an early childhood classroom, whether it's, a kindergartner that came in off the street and we're like, oh, they've had no speech support or any intervention up till now, and they have no intelligible speech. Wherever they're starting, that's like we don't have to wait at all. We start right now and we build our decision making from there. And it can go quickly, or it can, it just really depends on the team. Oh, hi, Chris. Yes, thank you. So Chris has some more resources. People are sharing that episode of Talking with Tech where they talk through it. Is there anything else you want to say about that?
We pretty much do the same Rachel did. My encouragement is always not all or nothing. right? So if we have to provide something quickly, we can't have these students waiting. We also can get so much buy-in by teams, by teachers, by all the connected people with the student, but we're not going to just stay there. And I think that's the biggest challenge is people get afraid. It's like, oh, but what about, we're not just staying in one place, but we're giving something so powerful and solid to these students so we can get language going. What we found is that as we've done this with our students, we've got speech paths and teachers coming to us, and we kind of laugh. We say we brought them into our black hole, because then they're like really motivated and passionate about the next step and the next step and the next step, and they're like draining us, right? Because we're like, shoo, we didn't know we created a monster here. But it has been so amazing to watch the changes and the knowledge base that has happened amongst all of our teams, because we started with this universal base and this set of strategies that could be applied by everyone. So yes, we should talk with Chris and some other people and get a conversation going, right, about what this looks like and the power of this universal core and these supports as we get started.
So I have just one quick story based on Beth just made a comment about, it doesn't mean only that one system.
Yep.
That's absolutely true. Here's one quick example that comes to mind. I had a little guy move into our county mid-year, it's probably like November, with a diagnosis of autism, and basically he was, I think, about 10 or 11 years old, and no verbal speech, but was easily stimulable and had a little sprinkles of experience. Mom knew he used a PECS book when he was tiny, and he'd had some things but he had nothing that he like owned, and that was his. But in November, when he came to us, we were already his third school for that year. And we knew there were just some different things with the family that made us think he might not be here long. So we did not take the time to match him up and really get him to use our universal core, even though those core words are broadly used. We started him on LAMP because our hope was that if he should move, we could just say he started on LAMP transitional like this, and this is how he's doing, and that would be easily replicable wherever he went. And it looks like he is moving a lot, and he has, in fact, he was here actually for a couple of years, and he did beautifully. He just needed some consistency of both the modeling and the resource available. But that's a case where we didn't say, hey, in our classroom we use this, because we could know some things about that student to say, that doesn't seem wise to teach him our vocabulary set when we don't know that he'll have long-term access to this. Let's give him something that could be replicated if he should move on. Does that make, that's one example.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a little rabbit hole. Happy to talk about it, but we're gonna keep moving on. There we go. So this is kind of reflecting back. This is kind of our wrap up to say, like, let's look back and say, how would I know I'm making an impact? How would I know if my building or my district or my county is moving from that expert model of relying on that one person and waiting on that one person to embracing a capacity building model where the responsibility is shared across a team. We are really emphasizing shared knowledge and things like that. So here are some of those things we look for and that we might see as evidence that we're moving towards that capacity building model. Within our learners, we would see that they have increased opportunities for communication success, that communication opportunities are embedded into their classroom and into the school day throughout the whole school community. And that's usually a sign that the culture is shifting. When you get that universal core board up on that gym wall and in the library and right by the bus stop and the playground board, those are signs. Those aren't like instant solutions, but those are signs that it's the culture is shifting, especially if you get to have opportunities to see people really engaging with those, not just the board is up on the playground, but that teachers are using it or families are using it or students are reaching out to use it. The other impact on students is greater consistency, that again, if there's some consistency program to program or within the building or within the county, that it's not every year is a whole new language system and my goals are different and the approaches are different. But while there can be some independent, whatever flavor, I guess, to your instruction and what that looks like, that there is some consistency in the knowledge base and the application of those those skills that we've learned, that we learn our best for our kids. And the other impact is that there shouldn't be so much of a wait, that there can be a quicker access to tools, strategies, and a supportive learning environment. So those are some of those signs that you'll see as you shift away from that expert model into that capacity building model and how it can benefit our learners. You want to do this one?
Yeah, so we've done capacity building for quite a while. And we started with a framework that we're in fact revisiting right now. So hopefully we'll be able to share it very soon at one of the conferences around how do you build capacity. And so we start with professional learning. And what we found over time is that when we have them go through professional learning with us, and then we do a job embedded professional learning, some way that we're in the classrooms. And I saw earlier somebody wants Rachel to make a meme about influencers versus experts. And so what we found is there were hundreds within our larger view, but even within small districts, 3 or 4 people that became influencers. And they pretty much ran ahead of us, right? We got it started and they took off. And over time, we're asking them to come back and share with the larger community what they discovered. And so when it impacts a small staff or even a classroom, it's hard to not share when you're seeing success. And so what we found, we did a 3-year job embedded, and by the 3rd year, the teams were creating ways to be influencers. So they were choosing, who am I going to influence next? Right? And so they would do a presentation for their Board of Education. They would do something in the community. They would do something at another school. So we had one school that partnered with another school and they were still learning. So they bused all of the students, right, in one of the classrooms to the other building once a month to participate in all those activities so that the teachers and the students could experience that learning environment, that instructional environment. And then they took it back and began to try. Right? And so we saw a huge impact on staff as they began to share amongst themselves, and they felt empowered because they didn't need to be the expert. They were the influencer. They had something they wanted to share. They had a story. And as they shared it, it built and built and built, right? So the impact on the staff can be much greater than you would even imagine, as it is a groundswell amongst them.
Man, when we talk about, like, sometimes you have those islands where classrooms are just like, wow, they're doing this and they're doing this. What a great way to use that island to help build capacity. So if you have a stellar team in mind, think about how, why can't there be hey, you know what, do you want to team up with this other class and you guys will do an activity together, and support staff will be there that day to help run stations or whatever. They get to see more of the tools and strategies in action. That's a great idea. And finally, impact on the organization. This is, I feel like, has been some discussion over there in chat.
And I haven't been watching that.
Okay,
so, but when we think about the organization as a whole, it truly does develop a culture. And so I've gone into buildings where, AAC is honored, where communication is honored, because you can see it everywhere. And then if you think about how fast you can change. So, if you're in your own building and then your students go to junior high, right? Or they're in a preschool, they go to elementary, and the culture isn't the same, right? Everything kind of, you're back in the beginning or you're stuck, right? It accelerates the change across an entire district or a county when everybody is on the same page, when you're in those conversations, you're having that dialogue. It also allows sustainability. And so we've talked about that, changing culture, changing staff, all of that. Well, if there's a mindset, if there's a set of training modules, if there's professional development that everybody's decided on, then you can get those people up to speed pretty quickly, get them in the know, and that allows the sustainability to go over time. The other thing that we have found across an organization is if everybody has helped be part of changing the culture by adapting certain strategies and skills. So say we apply it specifically to AAC. Well, now we're looking at literacy, and oh my gosh, aided language input works there too. Or that skill that we've developed in that classroom and those staff members are able to do is going to support literacy too. So again, it's sharing that knowledge where we're all collaborating together versus, oh, wait till she comes in, wait till the literacy expert comes in. We break down those barriers across an organization by building capacity.
So there it is, you guys. That's our that's our big picture of shifting. And I'm curious if anybody had kind of a mindset shift and came into this thinking, what do you mean no experts? I wanted to be the expert. I like being, maybe you like being the expert because you studied hard, and I want to honor that. Some of you have really deep knowledge and deep understanding. However, I hope you've seen the case of how building capacity can really be the best possible long-term solution, both for our buildings, but also for our staff and the learning communities we're building, and more responsive for our learners. And hopefully through that too, our families benefit with being part of that and being recognized as kind of the experts and understanding their child, and that their voices are always welcome to that table in that conversation. So think about that, and how team members can become influencers rather than experts, and keep that ripple effect going across your learning community.
So one of the things I always ask people, so I present in lots of different ways with Rachel. We both find that there are people in the audience that could do this much better than us, right? They know more, they have more experience in a specific area, and we fully admit that, right? But my charge to them is, who are you influencing with that knowledge? And I find that we know certain things, but do we know how to share it? Right? Do we know how to coach? Do we know how to build enough knowledge that is understandable, right? Not in our speeches or all of our fancy language, but can we share it in a way that parents and families and other staff people and people in the community can go, oh my gosh, I can do that. Absolutely. I am ready to do that. And that's what we want you to leave with, is the idea of, okay, who am I going to influence? What do I have to influence about, and where am I going to start?
I hope that you came away with some ideas and have kind of an inspiration or feel a nudge of someone you want to share this with, someone you want to influence. One of the beautiful things about AAC in the Cloud is this is a true capacity building project, because Brian and his team have not only invited just incredible speakers year after year, but they're recorded and they're available. And I saw early on, I think Rachael Madel was in here, and I saw someone say, Rachel, I send people to your talk all the time. That's capacity building. That's a stored, we have all these amazing content areas all recorded over the past years. And I reference people back to that as well. Yeah. So I hope I'm honored that this conversation gets to join that collection, and we can refer people back to it when we talk about building capacity. So.
And feel free to reach out. You've got our emails, and it looks like.
Yes, we can post that. Yeah. I'll add that in comments as we go. I'll stop sharing so we can.
There we go. That's in our slides.
Yeah, it is in our slides. I'll drop that coherence link in here. Just gotta get my tabs straight. Hang on. Any other burning questions we can answer while we're here for the last couple minutes? I stopped sharing, right? Okay. In the middle, I don't know if anybody heard it, but we had a little rainstorm come through, and I sat here going, oh my, I wonder if everyone can hear how much it's raining here right now. I love the feedback. Thanks. So I've got to go back and read some of this in the chat. But
yeah, and we will answer things. So if there's specific questions, we'll come back and take a look at those. Thanks, Chris, for commenting about the conversation. We have it so many times amongst small groups, and we felt it was so important to get it out there and get these thoughts going with everyone.
Trying to find the coherence link. I will drop that in though. There's the title, the full title. Thank you guys for joining us today. I'm excited to see other people's presentations today and tomorrow. I'm going to get the link.
Well, thank you, Rachel and Marlene, for your expertise in building capacity and supporting the whole school team. I think the chat is just very rich, and there's so many great ideas being shared. So thank you so much for coming and inspiring everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, this is the close of this session, and you can contact the presenters by their email.